You thought the battle was destroying you, but what if the enemy has already lost access to your life? What if the attacks became weaker because your faith became stronger? There are signs that reveal when darkness can no longer intimidate you. And tonight, those signs are being exposed. But the question is this: have you already crossed the line where fear no longer controls you? Stay with me, because what you are about to discover may completely change how you see your spiritual battle. Before you can recognize victory, you must understand what fear was doing to you. There was a time when every strange situation made you panic: a bad dream, a sudden conflict, an unexpected setback, a disturbing thought. You immediately wondered, is something spiritual happening against me? Fear became the first voice you heard, but something changed. You began praying instead of panicking. You began standing instead of running. You began trusting God instead of interpreting every difficulty as proof that darkness had won. That change matters, because spiritual maturity is not the absence of battles, it is the refusal to let battles control your identity. When fear loses its grip, intimidation loses its greatest weapon. You may still face opposition. You may still experience difficult people. You may still walk through seasons that make no sense. But internally, something has shifted. You are no longer easily shaken. You are no longer spending every night wondering who is against you. You are no longer giving every strange event a supernatural explanation. You have learned to test what you experience through wisdom, prayer, scripture, and discernment. That is important, because not every problem is witchcraft. Sometimes people are simply difficult. Sometimes circumstances are simply painful. Sometimes your own exhaustion makes everything feel darker than it really is. Victory requires discernment. You do not need to become obsessed with darkness to become strong in God. In fact, one of the clearest signs of spiritual strength is that you stop giving darkness your constant attention. You stop looking for an enemy behind every door. You stop assuming every disagreement is an attack. You stop allowing fear to write the story of your life. Instead, your attention returns to God. Your prayer becomes stronger. Your mind becomes steadier. Your decisions become wiser. And your peace becomes harder to steal. Imagine someone who once could not sleep because they were terrified of spiritual attacks. Now they lie down and pray. They wake up and give thanks. They encounter opposition and respond with wisdom instead of panic. That is transformation. That is growth. And if you have experienced that change, do not overlook it. You may think nothing happened because there was no dramatic moment. But sometimes the greatest victory is simply realizing that what once terrified you no longer owns you. You do not need to prove that you have defeated a particular person. You do not need to confront everyone you suspect. You do not need to announce your spiritual warfare to the world. Walk quietly, Stay grounded, stay prayerful, stay discerning, and refuse to let fear become your master. Because when fear no longer dictates your decisions, intimidation has already lost one of its strongest footholds. You you are not called to live terrified of darkness. You are called to live anchored in God. And when your confidence is rooted there, your entire posture changes. You stop reacting, you start discerning, you stop trembling, you start standing. And sometimes that quiet transformation is the first unmistakable evidence that something has changed. There are battles that do not arrive once, they arrive in cycles. The same conflict, the same temptation, the same fear, the same destructive relationship, the same pattern of disappointment. You recover, and then it happens again. You pray, and then another setback appears. You make progress, and somehow find yourself back in the same place. But then something changes. The cycle begins to break, not because every problem suddenly disappears, but because you are no longer responding to life the same way. You recognize the pattern. You recognize what drains you. You recognize which environments destroy your peace. You recognize which voices pull you away from wisdom. And instead of repeatedly walking into the same trap, you begin making different decisions. That is a powerful form of victory. You may once have believed that everyone around you was responsible for your setbacks. But spiritual maturity teaches you something deeper. You cannot control every person, you cannot control every circumstance, but you can control your response. You can establish boundaries. You can refuse manipulation. You can stop returning to environments that repeatedly damage your peace. You can forgive without reopening every door. You can love people without giving everyone unlimited access to your life. And you can pray without becoming consumed by suspicion. That is where many people misunderstand spiritual warfare. They think victory means constantly fighting an invisible enemy. Sometimes victory looks completely different. Sometimes victory is walking away from an unhealthy situation without hatred. Sometimes victory is refusing to retaliate when someone provokes you. Sometimes victory is keeping your mouth closed when anger tells you to speak. Sometimes victory is choosing wisdom when fear demands an immediate reaction. And sometimes victory is finally recognizing that a recurring problem needs practical action, not endless speculation. If someone continually lies to you, establish boundaries. If someone continually disrespects you, create distance. If habit repeatedly destroys your progress, confront the habit. If a relationship repeatedly produces chaos, seek wise counsel. If anxiety is overwhelming you, do not be ashamed to seek qualified help. Faith and wisdom are not enemies, they work together. The enemy does not need supernatural access to damage your life if you repeatedly give destructive patterns permission to remain. That is why breaking cycles is so significant. You begin saying, "This ends with me," not through rage, not through revenge, not through obsession, through obedience, through discipline, through prayer, through wisdom, through changed behavior. Think about the person who always reacted immediately whenever someone offended them. One message could ruin their entire day. One accusation could destroy their peace. One disagreement could trigger an emotional explosion. Then one day they stop, they breathe, they pray, they think, they respond carefully. The person who once controlled their emotions suddenly discovers they no longer have that power. That is a breakthrough. You have to understand this. Not every victory will feel dramatic. Some victories are almost invisible. You simply notice that you are no longer addicted to chaos. You no longer chase explanations for everything. You no longer need revenge. You no longer need everyone to understand your side. You no longer feel compelled to fight every battle. Your peace becomes more valuable than your need to prove yourself right. That is strength. And if the patterns that once repeatedly defeated you are losing their power, do not dismiss that transformation. Protect it. Do not return to what God helped you escape. Do not reopen doors simply because you feel lonely. Do not confuse familiarity with destiny. Do not let temporary emotions pull you back into permanent cycles. Keep moving forward. Keep your spiritual life grounded in scripture, prayer, wisdom, and community. And remember this: your victory does not require you to identify an enemy behind every difficulty. Your victory is demonstrated by becoming stronger, wiser, steadier, and more discerning than you were before. When the old cycle appears and you respond differently, something has changed. When the same provocation comes and you refuse to collapse, something has changed. When the same temptation returns and you choose obedience, something has changed. When the same fear knocks and you refuse to surrender your peace, something has changed. The cycle is losing its authority, and the person you used to be is no longer the person standing in the battle. One of the strongest signs that you have moved into spiritual maturity is surprisingly simple. You stop living like everyone is your enemy. There was a time when every whisper felt suspicious, every strange look felt intentional, every disagreement seemed connected to something darker. Every setback made you ask, who is doing this to me? But eventually, something changes. You realize that constant suspicion is not freedom. Constant fear is not discernment. And constantly searching for enemies can become its own prison. So you begin looking in a different direction. You begin asking, what is God teaching me through this? That question changes everything. Because when your attention moves from obsession with darkness toward obedience to God, your entire spiritual posture becomes different. You stop giving your energy to people you cannot control. You stop trying to decode every conversation. You stop monitoring everyone around you. You stop believing that every person who disagrees with you must secretly want your destruction. Instead, you become watchful without becoming paranoid. You become discerning without becoming suspicious of everyone. You become spiritually alert without becoming spiritually obsessed. That distinction matters. Real spiritual strength does not require you to spend every waking moment thinking about evil. Your life cannot be built around what you fear. It must be built around what you believe. Think about how much energy fear can consume. You wake up thinking about who might be against you. You go through your day analyzing conversations. You replay old arguments. You search for hidden meanings. You wonder whether someone secretly envies you. You interpret every inconvenience as a sign. And slowly, without realizing it, your attention becomes trapped. But then comes the breakthrough. You decide that your peace is more important than your suspicions. You decide that wisdom is more powerful than speculation. You decide that you will pray instead of obsess. You will verify instead of assume. You will confront genuine problems directly instead of creating invisible explanations for everything. That is maturity. And it does not mean you become careless. You still recognize manipulation. You still recognize unhealthy behavior. You still establish boundaries. You still listen to your discernment, but you stop allowing suspicion to become your identity. There is another sign that often accompanies these transformations. You become less interested in proving that you are spiritually powerful. You do not need to tell everyone that you are anointed. You do not need to announce every spiritual battle. You do not need to publicly identify enemies. You simply live differently. Your character becomes stronger. Your words become more measured. Your decisions become more disciplined. Your faith becomes more consistent. And people notice, not because you are shouting about victory, but because your life begins reflecting stability. Imagine someone tries to provoke you. The old, you would have reacted immediately. The new, you pauses. You pray. You think. You choose your response. That pause is powerful because the ability to control your response means someone else no longer controls your emotional state. That is freedom. And there is another profound shift. You begin becoming grateful again. You notice ordinary blessings. You appreciate your family. You value genuine friendships. You enjoy moments of peace. You become present instead of constantly waiting for the next attack. That is important because fear always tells you to prepare for disaster. Faith teaches you to remain grounded in the present while trusting God with what you cannot control. So, if you have reached a place where you no longer wake up obsessed with enemies, pay attention. If you can recognize problems without becoming consumed by them, pay attention. If you can protect yourself without hating everyone around you, pay attention. If you can pray for protection without spending your entire life searching for threats, pay attention. Something has matured inside you. You are learning that victory is not measured by how many enemies you can identify. Victory is measured by how deeply your life is anchored in truth, wisdom, faith, and peace. Do not surrender that progress. Do not return to constant suspicion. Do not allow fear based voices to convince you that everyone is secretly plotting against you. Walk carefully, pray consistently, use wisdom, keep healthy boundaries, and let your life become the evidence. Because when you stop being controlled by the fear of who might be against you, you become free to focus on the God who is with you. And that is a far more powerful place to stand. There comes a moment when you realize the greatest evidence of victory is not what happens around you, it is what happens inside you. The chaos may still exist, difficult people may still exist, unexpected problems may still appear, but they no longer have the same authority over your heart. You have learned how to remain steady. You have learned how to pray before reacting. You have learned how to think before speaking. You have learned that not every battle deserves your attention. And that is powerful because anyone can become loud when they are afraid, but strength produces restraint. Anyone can react when they feel attacked, but wisdom knows when to respond and when to walk away. Anyone can become consumed by the desire to expose an enemy. But maturity understands that your greatest responsibility is to protect the condition of your own heart. This is where your victory becomes visible. Look at your life. Are you becoming more peaceful? Are you becoming more disciplined? Are you becoming more patient? Are you becoming harder to manipulate? Are you becoming more selective about the voices you allow into your mind? Are you becoming quicker to forgive without becoming careless? Are you becoming stronger without becoming bitter? These are not small changes, they are evidence of transformation. A person can spend years talking about spiritual warfare and still remain controlled by anger, jealousy, fear, revenge, and suspicion. But another person may say very little about warfare while quietly becoming wiser, calmer, more prayerful, and more disciplined. Which life demonstrates greater victory? Look at the fruit. That is where the truth becomes visible. If your spiritual journey is producing greater love, self control, wisdom, courage, patience, and discernment, protect that growth. Do not allow the obsession with enemies to destroy the very peace you prayed for. There is a trap that many people fall into. They become so focused on defeating darkness that they forget to build their lives. They study attacks but neglect character. They study enemies but neglect wisdom. They talk about curses but ignore destructive habits. They pray against opposition but refuse to forgive. They want supernatural breakthroughs while refusing practical responsibility. Do not fall into that trap. Your faith should make you stronger in everyday life. It should help you become more disciplined with your time, more careful with your relationships, more responsible with your decisions, more compassionate, toward others, more courageous when facing adversity, more honest when confronting your own weaknesses. That is real transformation. Maybe you used to collapse whenever something went wrong. Now you recover. Maybe you used to respond to insults with insults. Now you choose restraint. Maybe you used to chase people who rejected you. Now you understand your worth and walk away with dignity. Maybe you used to live in constant fear of what someone might do. Now you focus on what you can control. Maybe you used to believe that your future depended on defeating another person. Now you understand that your future requires faithfulness, wisdom, perseverance, and obedience. That is a different level of freedom. And here is the warning: do not become arrogant because you believe you have won. Pride can destroy what fear could not. Never become obsessed with proving your spiritual superiority. Never use your faith as an excuse to hate people. Never accuse someone of witchcraft without evidence. Never retaliate because you believe someone is spiritually attacking you. Leave vengeance to God. Your assignment is not to destroy people. Your assignment is to remain faithful, stay alert, stay humble, stay prayerful, stay wise. If someone genuinely harms you, establish boundaries. If someone threatens your safety, seek appropriate help. If you are facing serious emotional distress, reach out to someone trustworthy and qualified. Faith does not require you to ignore reality. It gives you courage to face reality without surrendering your hope. And when you can stand in the middle of difficulty without becoming consumed by fear, you have discovered something powerful. Your peace is no longer dependent on everyone around you behaving perfectly. Your confidence is no longer dependent on having every question answered. Your future is no longer controlled by the opinions of people who do not understand your journey. You are moving forward. You are becoming stronger. You are becoming wiser. You are becoming harder to manipulate. And that is the victory you should protect. So, if these signs are appearing in your life, do not spend your energy searching for someone to blame. Spend it building what God has placed in your hands. Pray, grow, forgive, set boundaries. Use wisdom. Keep moving. Let your character become stronger than your fear. Let your faith become deeper than your circumstances. And let the fruit of your life speak louder than every accusation surrounding you. Because when peace has returned, wisdom has increased, destructive cycles have weakened, and fear no longer controls your decisions. You do not need to spend your life proving that you defeated anyone. Your transformed life is the evidence, and the greatest victory is not that somebody else lost. The greatest victory is that you refuse to lose yourself. You are not standing where you used to stand. Fear no longer has the final word over your life. Walk forward with wisdom, prayer, courage, and unshakable faith. Do not chase enemies. Build your life, guard your peace, and remain anchored in God. What tried to break you has become part of the testimony of how you learned to stand. You are still here, you are still standing, and you will not surrender your peace.